Yeah, we back. Part three. Let's get into it, man. As you know, a couple days ago, I began a brand new series entitled The Memoirs of Jean-Jacques Dessalines' secretary, written by Boisrond-Tonnerre in 1804. This right here is a first-hand written account from the Haitian Revolution, written by Dessalines' right-hand man, his personal private secretary, Boisrond-Tonnerre. In part 1, we gave the introduction, a brief account of the central figure, and we also discussed how the French just landed into the colony. We discussed the first few battles that occurred. In part 2, we discussed the legendary battle of Leclerc, where damn near almost 20 French generals got assassinated. And towards the end, we discussed how General André Rigaud, he was arrested and deported by the French army. And also we discussed a situation where there was some miscommunication between Toussaint and Christophe. Christophe was deceived by the proclamations made by the French, and he was incorporated back into the French military. And then Toussaint Louverture followed his footsteps, and then Dessalines followed his footsteps, and they were back reincorporated into the French military. Now we are going to get started right back again. Let's get back into it. The orders for General Rigaud's departure to France stated that all the officers attached to his person or those who had come with him from France would also be forced to leave the colony. These unfortunates were seized and imprisoned before they had time to give their families the news or to receive any. They embarked as they had come, without assistance and without money. Some women from the capital, of whom they were known only by the misfortune which pursued them, procured for them some money. These unfortunates in the suite paid dearly for this act of commiseration. Most were wanted for having shown too much humanity and were either hanged or drowned. Wait, time out. So as I told y'all before, General André Rigaud and all his squadron, all his homeboys, they all got imprisoned, they all got locked up and sent away to France. So I guess, they had some shorties, they had some, girlfriends in the capital, and, they came and, gave them some money, gave them something to, for the road, right? And then apparently because of that, the French took those women and hung them or drowned them. I don't even know what to say, man. Let's continue. Rigaud's departure was the signal for massacre and murder. Toussaint had obtained his resignation with permission to retire to the district of Henry, where he had acquired a plantation and where he had lived since his submission with his wife and his niece. His two sons, employed in the French army, who had been sent back to him during the first parleys, had fought with their father and no longer enjoyed the sort of consideration accorded to them during the crossing. Embarking on this leader, to whom they all had their eyes open, as soon as Rigaud left, would have been acted too hastily. Besides, the instigation to the colonists had not yet made the Captain General shameless enough to take such a decided part. It was shortly after this time that French General Leclerc had met Dessalines for the first time. General Leclerc was beginning to mold himself to communal cruelty and consequently had learned from his advice that in order to conquer at Saint-Domingue two classes of men united to maintain liberty, it was necessary to divide them. He therefore endeavored to put the finishing touches to the project begun by Agent General Edouville from years ago. Leclerc flattered Dessalines, showered him with praises which he claimed his conduct deserved, assured him that he could count on the special benevolence of the government, and that the first consul Bonaparte, according to favorable reports that he had done in his favor, would not delay conferring on him a reward worthy of him. Finally, he uses all of his political commonplaces by which the whites, and especially the French, believe they are tricking the blacks and the mulattoes. Dessalines saw what kind of man he had to deal with and was on his guard. After having therefore thanked the Captain General, he begged him to believe that his strongest desire was to retire to France with all his family, that, moreover, he was relying on the good intentions of the government, to which he was forever devoted. "You are too important here," said Leclerc. "Give me the satisfaction of presenting to you the first consul Bonaparte. You know he's my brother-in-law." "This period is very late," replied Dessalines, "but I only want you to obey." Whether Leclerc was really being duped, or whether he did not believe him clever enough to discover the trap that was set for him, he began to insinuate to him that until then it had not been possible for him to discover what were the real enemies of the French government, but that he had hoped by his means to learn which people it was necessary to fight to restore the good order and the harmony. As for the settlers, he said, they are so unhappy and have so little influence that it is not presumable that they find their benefit in the disturbances. They all have their families and properties in France. Dessalines felt all the consequence of his answer and made it in the views of the Captain General. "Since we are of the same opinion," said the latter, "I think that the only course of action to take will be to exterminate them all, but I am embarrassed about the choice of means. The French troops are so diminished by disease that we hardly have enough left to guard our towns. I would therefore be of the opinion that you should raise an army of 5,000 men from the country for this expedition, which will only last as long as you wish it to make. Wait," he added, "I will dispatch the order to you, as well as that, taking the quantity of arms and ammunition which will be necessary for you." In fact, he wrote the letter with his own hand and gave Dessalines 500 double louis for the expenses of the expedition, warning him that he would leave when he thought it fit. Before leaving the capital, it was in Dessalines' best interest to see all the French generals and find out their opinions. He first went to the chief of staff of the army, who no doubt, displeased from then on with the captain general, told him that the 13th Demi Brigade was to be incorporated as a sapper in the Guard of Honor, and that he saw with pain that the unfortunate people who made up this body would be sacrificed. It didn't take more to arouse the concern of Dessalines, who, immediately after the visit he had just made to the chief of staff, learned what had just happened in Gonaives. There, Brunet had received orders to canton in the vicinity of the dwelling where Toussaint Louverture had resided. A battalion of white troops who daily committed thefts and raids on the neighboring plantations. Toussaint had threatened to punish them. One day, and this was precisely the day before Dessalines had entered the capital, these troops moved to Toussaint's house and insulted him. Pushed to good by their insolence, this general mounts on horseback with the intention of complaining. But he had no sooner arrived at Gonaives when an aide-de-camp of Brunet had seized him and arrested him. It was in such a state that they embarked and took to the capital this unfortunate and too credulous chief, from whom they did not even dare to learn the reasons of his arrest. It was a stroke of light for Dessalines. He immediately left for the capital with the intention of warning the generals and the other demi-brigades which were cantoned at the capital, at Petit-Anse, and in the vicinity of the town. He first goes to Petit-Anse, speaks to Pétion, whom he saw for the first time, urges him to take his side, and goes from there to the capital, where he told Clairvaux what happened, what he saw and what he heard, warning him that he has everything to fear of the French if his regiment returns to town. General Christophe was of the same opinion, but some clouds which had risen between Clairvaux and today had prevented him from meeting this general. The time for this unity is past, Dessalines told them, and it is only against the whites that our resentment should be directed. As for me, I've already made up my mind to die, their most cruel enemy. Imitate me or you are lost. Time out. Man, Dessalines got bars, man. Dessalines got bars, bro. I'm telling you, he been dropping quotables all over this book, man. Anyways, let's get back into it. In the meantime, Clairvaux receives the order to return to the capital, in spite of Dessalines' advice. The very evening of that day, the whole demi-brigade was drowned. Damn, bro. Dessalines told y'all niggas. Dessalines told y'all don't go back to the capital, man. Dessalines told y'all don't go back to the capital, man. Dessalines told y'all don't go back to the capital. God damn it. Rest in peace to the fallen soldiers. And actually, hold up. Before we get back into it, the reason why Dessalines and Christophe and Clairvaux and everybody was incorporated back into the French army was for this specific reason. They were all going to be either assassinated, drowned, killed, or imprisoned and sent back to France. That was the plan the whole time, right? They were never going to be incorporated back into the French army. That whole shit was a finesse move, a con game. That's how they got Toussaint arrested. That's how they got Rigaud arrested. And that's why the whole demi-brigade got drowned. That was the plan. We were going to finesse them, you know, act like we their friends, bring them in, flatter them, load them with honors, and then we're going to kill them. And, you know, it is what it is, man. That's war, man. That's war. Let's get back into it. Fortunately for Clairvaux, he had left the capital, his wife and her belongings, and had withdrawn them from the city under the pretext of bringing them back. It was at this time that the general disarmament of disgruntled farmers and soldiers, of those who had retired to the countryside, was ordered. Those of the Moustique, situated between the Mole and Port-de-Paix, were the first to rise up, because the country they inhabited, covered with woods and almost uncultivated, offered fewer advantages to the French for pursuing them. At the same time, most of Plaisance, located in the commune of Gonaives, rose up against the atrocities that the soldiers had carried out against the residents. The command of Saint-Marc was therefore entrusted to Dessalines, who had come from the capital in Artibonite, where he was the safeguard of the farmers, and they sent in pursuit of the insurgents. Brunet, vulgarly named Constable de Leclerc, Brunet set out from Gonaives, which was 6 leagues distant from it, massacred and disarmed the cultivators there, whom he found defenseless. Fuck niggas, man. I hate these niggas. And fled the smallest gathering of those who wanted to repel force by force. He does not find an innocent in the district of Plaisance or Gourmont. He puts part of it to the sword and sends the other back to Gonaives to be exposed to the gallows there. Now, time out. I just want to say it's difficult for me to study history. Like, studying history, I go through a whole series of emotions as I study history, right? Because I put myself in the shoes of the ancestors that went through these atrocities and went through these events, and you know, it really be hitting me. I be getting goosebumps, and I really, like, my heart be beating fast, and I be getting angry, and like I be full of rage. I just want to and you know, I'm sorry. Like, studying history, I understand why they don't teach us our history, because if we did, man. Anyways, let's continue. It's not more than tortures and drownings. Men, women, and children, old people, are all seen as enemy combatants to the French. What excess of barbarism and injustice! The government orders the re-entry to their respective dwellings on the part of the cultivators who practice vagrancy in the towns, and all those whom agents find in the countryside are inhumanely shot or hanged. These executions, far from appeasing the insurrection, propagated it, and soon one was obliged to ask for General Dessalines, who left the town of Saint-Marc with the colonial troops which he had commanded. This general arrived at the town of Plaisance. He witnesses the cruelty that the French are practicing there, and his party is soon taken. Pétion and the 13th Demi Brigade were then in Plaisance. The common misfortune had brought these two men closer. They communicated their feelings to each other about what was happening, and Dessalines thought it was necessary to warn Pétion about the dangers he would encounter if he returned to the capital with his troops. Brunet, however, quiet on the situation of Gourmont and Plaisance, where he had left European troops, and where he knew Dessalines had arrived, pursued the rebels to the district of Pendas, 3 leagues distant from Gourmont. Dessalines, who, receiving the order to march against the insurgents, had asked for ammunition and 1,500 guns, had then distributed by his soldiers to the rebellious farmers from whom they had received bad guns. Then learned of Brunet's bad position. He sends the rebels in pursuit, among whom he mixes up some former soldiers who surround Brunet so well that he is obliged to ask for help from Jacques Maurepas, who was in command at Port-Épée. Maurepas rushed up and did not dare to force the passage from Gourmont to Gonaives any more than Brunet. These 2 generals, therefore, returned to the town of Port-Épée, where they found other insurgents in possession of the great fort. At the head of these rebels was François Capois, a young man of the most enterprising character, active, of uncommon bravery, and declared enemy of the French. He had been a captain in the 9th Demi Brigade and had not imitated the low submission of the other officers of his corps. It was by secret orders which he had received from Dessalines that he had attacked and taken the great fort of Port-Épée and brought out all the ammunition that he found there. He had not seen fit to set himself up in this fort, where he might have been blockaded and forced to sustain a siege which would starve him. He had evacuated it as soon as the forces of Brunet and Maurepas had appeared. One expects here to see Brunet making his reports to the Captain General. The most honorable mention of the service came only from returning Maurepas to him. This tiger stopping him, and unfortunate, was drowned in the roadstead of Capai. Jesus Christ, bro. Jesus Christ. This unfortunate was drowned in the roadstead of the capital with his entire family. Maurepas, however, had surrendered to the French. He had fought at the head of the 9th Demi Brigade, which he had commanded, and disarmed the blacks. But Maurepas was rich. He had at the time, at the arrival of the French forces, given immense sums to General de Belle. Maurepas was a criminal because he was black. Maurepas was soon to be hanged, drowned, or shot. Maurepas' property was to be confiscated, as much as Brunet should profit from this windfall than anyone else, since he happened to be on the spot. What logic is yours? Jesus Christ, man. Rest in peace to General Jacques Maurepas. Let's continue. When all of this was happening at Port-Épée, Dessalines was reorganizing the insurrection at Gourmont and Plaisance. In these 2 quarters, he placed in the most dangerous posts strong ambushes composed of soldiers and farmers whom he had armed and effected to pass through them French battalions which were at Plaisance and Gourmont, company by company. It is easy to judge that the troops of the country soon came to the boat. He learns that a strong detachment out of Henry has the order to return to Gonaives. He has under the leadership of a brigade commander named Julien an ambush of 60 men who executed his orders so well that he did not run away, not a single Frenchman. A battalion of the Expeditionary Legion at Saint-Michel, this one was missed. He had already received orders to return to Gonaives. These expeditions were so well run that no one knew positively in Gonaives by whom they were led. However, on returning to Gonaives, Dessalines met several women who were fleeing and who told him that the city was currently in turmoil, expecting at every moment to see several brigands descend upon her. This general had only a few dragoons around him and did not want to run the risk of being arrested as Toussaint had been. He traversed the plantations and soon formed a force of 150 men who escorted him to the George plantation, a league distant from Gonaives. There resided his wife and his family, whom he wanted to save. What is his surprise when he finds his house surrounded by a large guard? At his appearance, the French were taken aback. Now, time out. I don't want to hear nothing about black men don't protect black women. Dessalines pulled up 150 deep to protect his wife and his kids, man. 150 deep, 100 soldiers mobbing deep. And apparently the French had Dessalines' house surrounded, and they were surprised when he pulled up. They were like, damn, we ain't expect Dessalines to show up. Yeah, nigga, Dessalines in the building, bitch ass nigga. Yeah, now let's continue. At his appearance, the French were taken aback. The commandant stammered an excuse and claimed to have been sent only to guard his wife. Fucking liar. I wish I could take these niggas back from the dead and strangle them back to death. Let's continue. The commandant stammered an excuse and claims to have been sent only to guard his wife, according to rumors that the brigands were threatening to descend on Gonaives. Brigadier General Vernet, still in command of the district of Gonaives, lived a short distance from this house. This officer, warned by General Dessalines, waited in a trance as his absence increased more and more. His rupture with the French, and had been unable to oppose the French garrison sending a guard which had not only to protect the general's wife, Dessalines feigning the most outraged and strong anger of the soldiers recruited by the officers that he had committed for this operation, orders that the European guard to withdraw. He went to Gonaives himself and asked for the commander of the place, to whom he swore that if he did not put an end to the insulting rumors which were debited against his person, he would expose his garrison to be attacked by his troops. The reassured French seemed submissive and ready to follow him against the brigands. Dessalines, satisfied with their submission, withdrew and meditated a bolder blow, which lacked only too much haste. Dessalines ordered Brigadier General Vernet to have Brigade Commander Gabar and the troops under his orders quartered at a reasonable distance from the town of Gonaives, and forbade him to attack before having received the order. He took with him a few companies of dragoons, went to the Artibonite, resolved to carry La Cretapéo, where 3 French tax collectors were confined, he found, as he had ordered. 3,000 armed cultivators, ordered them to make a false attack on the town of Petit Rivière, while he pretended to have passed through them to bring aid to the French. Unfortunately, Black makes a real attack and is pushed back. Dessalines, pretending all his presence of mind, entered at the head of a small number of dragoons he had led, and pretending to have run the greatest dangers, he gave the commander of the battalion, Andro, who had commanded Cretapéo, to evacuate it, since it is no longer possible for the French to resist it. This one refuses under various pretexts. Already the suit is made to stop him. He realizes that he is followed by a guard who claims to be sent for his escort. He dissipates it by threatening to shoot the first who does not withdraw. The fort fired the alarm cannon to ask for help. 3,000 cultivators present themselves in the Bourg. Andro and his garrison climbed the rampart to the fort and reached the main road that leads to Saint-Marc. His march was uncovered. He was pursued, and barely a dozen men returned with him to Saint-Marc, whence General Frézinet had come out to bring him aid. Frézinet in turn is pursued and forced to shut himself up within the walls. While Dessalines was busy securing the ammunition left by the French at Cretapéo, he informed General Vernet of the route of the French and warned him that it was time to attack the French. General Vernet was of the opinion that the insurgent cultivators should be the first to attack the place, and then bring in the 4th Demi Brigade commanded by General Gabard under the pretext of bringing relief to the place and of falling, then on the garrison. This plan was perfectly well conceived, but it lacked the impetuosity of Gabard, enemy of the French. Burning with the desire to single himself, Gabard marched at the head of his troop and arrived when the farmers were withdrawing. The ramparts were still hoarded by the French, who cried, "Que vive!" in the name of the 3rd Battalion of the 5th Light, and that of the 4th Colonel carried. The doors are open to Gabard. His troop was about to enter when the captain of Grenadiers, Victor, explained, "We are your enemies. Shoot, we are going to fire." General Dessalines arrived then. He had walked all night. Overwhelmed with fatigue, he had stretched out on the high road. We had scarcely taken any rest when the blessing of the cannon had awakened him. In his presence, the troops thought a customary air. "General Dessalines is with us. General Dessalines is coming." Dessalines orders the assault. The French is seized by fear. Open the place and rush to the seaside. Our troops are already in the place and change the enemy who leans against the fort, which guarantees a rail, while waiting for the canoes to come to their seat. Soon they gain ground, barely firing a few gunshots at our troops arrayed in battle array on the shore. The next day, the French leave the town of Gonaives. After what happened at Petit Rivière and Gonaives, the French no longer doubted Dessalines' revolt. However, the French general, Quintin, who was in command at Saint-Marc, decided to write to him. He told him that rumors to which he could not believe told him that he had raised the standard of revolt against the French government, but that he knew him too well to suspect him capable of conduct so opposed to his interests and those of his troops. "I raised the banner of revolt," replied Dessalines, "because it is time to teach the French that they are monsters and this earth devours too slowly for the happiness of humanity." Man, listen, bro, I told y'all, Dessalines got bars, nigga. Hey, let's continue. Dessalines said, "I took the town of Petit Rivière and Gonaives, and tomorrow I will march against Saint-Marc." He kept his promise and appeared the next day before Saint-Marc. No one knew better than he how to handle black troops and lead them into fire. He knew it, and always gave the better part of his troops of the line to those of his officers to whom he entrusted an expedition. When he presented himself in the town of Saint-Marc, his force was made up of only the National Guard of Latibonite, which he had assembled in haste, a troop on which he counted little, but which he wanted to toughen up in battle, making them fight in open country. During the 8 days the siege of Saint-Marc lasted, French General Quintin made 2 attacks, where he was repulsed by the small number of troops drawn from the 4th and the 10th, but the National Guard proving little support to the line troops, Dessalines took advantage of the favorable weather, raised the siege, determined not to march against the enemy until after reorganizing his troops into regiments. He retired to the town of Latibonite for this purpose. This terror, which the French name had inspired, still reigned in the countryside. The old soldiers and the farmers had not yet come out of their retreats. Dessalines had little ammunition. He takes the most patriotic resolution, does not waver between public safety and the death of a few cowards. He orders numerous patrols to roam the plain and the hills to gather men able to bear arms, fire on all those who refuse to march, and manages in less than 8 days to form 4 half brigades that he exercises every day in the handling of arms. Time out. I'm not sure if y'all noticed, but multiple times throughout the story, like even just now when it said that Dessalines fired on everybody who refused to march. If you notice, earlier in the book I had mentioned that Dessalines was sick, right? He was suffering from some unknown illness, I'm assuming a fever or something like that. And then he tried to, muster up some troops, and he was pissed off that he could only muster up 60 troops after he returned from illness. And then he shot 2 of his captains dead in the head. Like, if you notice earlier in the book, I said that Dessalines grabbed his 2 pistols with vivacity and burned the brains of 2 captains who could not, muster enough troops. And then within 4 days, Dessalines was at the head of 5,000 troops. So listen, you ain't had no choice but to get down, bro. Like, the Haitian Revolution was not a democracy, bro. You either ride with the team or you ride with the French. And if you're not riding with the team, nigga, you getting shot. Let's continue. It was at this time that Captain General Leclerc who had everything to fear from the defection of the troops of the country encamped near the capital, resolved to drive them out after having tried everything to bring them back to the government party. They were attacked the first time, but without success. They were repulsed at the second affair, exporting their guns, which they could no longer fire for lack of ammunition. Pétion, who felt all the embarrassment of his position and that of his troops, resolved to join. General Dessalines, who he regarded as the commander-in-chief since the embarkation of Toussaint Louverture, it was not the same with all the chiefs who, in a smaller calamity, lent to the ambitions of command and irrecomplacent enough to deceive themselves about the results which the choice of a chief would entail, other than Dessalines. Besides, Dessalines alone possessed what might be called the force of life. He alone was still capable of disciplining men whom, already terrified by torture and drowning, knew only how to fight in the woods, where they defended themselves by seeking to sell dearly a life full of bitterness and condemnation, and who survived freedom only to take revenge. All these considerations, joined to the lack of unity and harmony which reigned in the troops, newly raised, induced Pétion to unite with the forces commanded by Dessalines. As a result of the ambition that was already devouring the commanders of the northern insurrection, several of them had made a split with General Christophe and Clairvaux. The unfortunates were divided before they could reunite. The Congos and almost the majority of the blacks of Guinea were masters of the districts of Gonaives, Dondon, and Marmelade, and disposed to fight equally the troops of the country who had just abandoned the French. Pétion was not aware that he would have to fight this party, which claimed to have at its head the sole general-in-chief. Pétion had almost no ammunition. The danger was pressing. He could try and exit from the French and find himself surrounded in his retreat. He began heading for the west, and after some fights he wiped off. He entered the town of Gonaives and met Dessalines. Christophe and Clairvaux remained in the north and supported with admirable constancy the efforts of the United French and Congo against their troops. It was at this time that Captain General Leclerc died. I don't know, like so many others, what kind of death he died. He found himself on a second outing against Christophe and Clairvaux at the capital, where it is claimed he was hit by a bullet. Some attribute this death to illness. Others put it down to the ambition of the first consul, who aspired for his sister to a higher alliance than that of the nephew of the Miscreant de la Plaine, hanged in effigy for thefts. It mattered to humanity that the numbers of tyranny diminished and his disappearance or death was good. What a monster had succeeded him. But let's not anticipate. The chief of staff of the army had also died. De Bell, as well as a host of other general officers who had disappeared. Fréron, sent sub-prefect to Leclerc, was poisoned by the colonists because he was just and did not understand anything or wanted to understand anything about the fashionable system. Bezenec, another colonial prefect, was poisoned. The whole party of the brother-in-law annihilated since his death. Boudet, the fox, one of the French generals who did the least harm, leaving for France and caring little to return in a country where, as he said when he left, there was nothing left but winds. 5 for stealing without sharing with anyone. Hardy died shortly afterwards. Marshal Besse, mulatto, who came with the French, embarked necessarily after an expedition to which he brought back via the persuasion of the cultivators, whom they wanted to exterminate. The countryside inhabited by farmers, and the troops of the country in arms. The cities offering nothing more than the disgusting spectacle of a general hospital, and whose terror had made so many cemeteries, the almost general insurrection, the raids of government so relaxed that the rebels received sub-tyrants, sailors and soldiers who were not paid, delaying the arms and the ammunition they needed. French commanders braying after their return to their homeland and surrendering or deserting their posts at the first fire of the enemy, the merchants impoverished by government loans and without credit because the generals monopolized all the business and seized the bulk of the foodstuffs which entered the cities from outside, the administrative officials squandering the finances at will. Finally, blacks, mulattoes, white soldiers, generals, administrators, French, Poles, Spaniards, and the whole island cursing your name as well as your memory. This is what your expedition will have been able to tell the first brigand from Europe. Paulette Bonaparte, bringing the remains of her infamous husband, accompanied by all her partisans, covered with the remains of the thousands of victims bent under the axe of the lictors of the pre-consul of Santo Domingo. You know what the quarry was worth. The foxes went back to France, but they left the tigers in Saint-Domingue. After Leclerc's death, Doré, the colonial prefect, who had replaced Bezenec, stirred the rudder of the boat for a few days, from which each had removed a part and handed it over to Rochambeau. I have to stop here. I'm going to produce on stage a monster of such extraordinary nature that I need to collect myself so as to not be accused of crossing the bounds of impartiality, more severe, giving it the true colors. Doré was more made back to bring back spirits. He had talents and more morals than Rochambeau. He did not like blood, and by sparing that of the blacks, he would have made them more miserly of that of his compatriots. Rochambeau, long since pointed out by the colonists, as well as the mass of the plantation owners, as the only general capable of saving the colony for France, and by the local knowledge he had acquired, sacked the government when he took over the reins. But who could hope for a happier change since Leclerc's death? The fox on his accession to the provisional consulate, where all those interested in the old system called him, that Saint-Domingue became a forest of gibbets, that the ships became jails, that corpses of the French, that divine justice month, either by the impartial hand of the epidemic, were merged with those of the blacks, sacrificed to the atrocious system of depopulation. It was under the government of this monster, incomprehensible in its cruelty, that the blood of the blacks and the mulattoes seemed to spurt on the satellites of the French government. At the Capitol every day, a few hundred blacks and emulators who had remained peaceful in the city were seen being dragged off to execution, and who were always accused of complicity with the rebels outside if they owned any property. Every day also, Negroes and mulattoes contemplated with vengeful satisfaction 15 or 20 cars dragging, not outside the gates, but in the intramural cemetery, their executioners whom the climate was devouring. We saw the bodies of these unfortunates sing on their way to the gibbets and console themselves for the harshness of their fate. By the death of their oppressors, this consolation was taken away from them, and soon the sick Europeans were evacuated, and Tortuga Island was where vengeance awaited them. In Port-au-Prince, La Valette had succeeded Rochambeau and followed the instructions of the latter so exactly that he was retained until the end. At the time of Leclerc, de Bureau was not in reality the commander of the Southern Department, but had been sent there only to transmit Rochambeau's bloodthirsty orders to La Plume and to supervise their execution. At the time of Jérémie, Dabois seconded too much then slide the streets of the government so that it thinks of raising it. At the town of Saint-Marc, the commanders followed one another quickly, as if they all wanted to flee this link, which at one time was the home of Dessalines. At the town of Jacques Mel commanded a Creole kind of swordsman, a rude man and more fit to be one of those supporters of public houses than to command troops. At the town of Meaux, Latouche reigned over the navy, demanded ranks for lieutenants and ensigns who did not have the courage to fight the barges, or to put it better, the black canoes which communicated from Gonaives to Rochambeau, and then to Jérémie. There, this leader of the floating army, as villainous in his taste and as in his life, tortured or caused to be tortured by the maritime rabble at his orders, the unfortunate blacks and mulattoes made prisoners on board these Republican vessels, where such mother, such wife, thought she had fed her son or her husband for 3 months, while the unfortunate man had been drowned the very day that he embarked. Yeah, so I think we could wrap up part 3 right here. And yeah, man, we're gonna wrap it up. I think we probably gonna have 2 more parts of this, I'm estimating. And yeah, man, it's your boy Never Dessalines back in the building. Yes, indeed. Like, share, subscribe, Cash App in the description. And I'm going on. Peace.